All right, welcome everyone. Today is Wednesday, the 30th of November, 2022, and this is the Cluster API community meeting. Cluster API is a sub-project of Kubernetes SIGs, and as such, we follow their community guidelines. So that basically means please raise your hand if you'd like to talk, and please treat each other kindly. So with that out of the way, at the beginning of our meetings, we like to give a chance for new attendees to introduce themselves or say hi. So we will take a couple seconds now and see if anyone would like to introduce yourself. Please feel free to unmute or raise your hand, and yeah, go ahead.
Can I go ahead? Yeah. Yep. So hi everyone. My name is Vibhor. I'm working as an MTS in VMware and joined VMware this year only. I was interested in knowing how this community works and how this project works. So just hopped into it. I'm also the part of Cluster API release team. Yeah, that's all about me. Thank you.
Awesome. Welcome, Vibhor.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ricky Stowski. I work at AWS. I'm a longtime supporter of Cluster API and previous user in my past lives. So I'm trying to dip my toes into a couple of the SIGs and see how things work around here.
Awesome. Welcome. Yeah, Hiromu, please.
Oh, hello everyone. I'm from NTT, Japan telecommunication company. Recently, I've started to contribute into a Cluster API, and today I'd like to talk about one specific issues, and if there is time, I'd like to ask about that issue. I will add that issue on the agenda later. Thanks.
Yeah, welcome. And yes, please please add it to the agenda and we'll get to it.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm not sure how to pronounce this right. Neromriel, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I'm not sure why it's that's just kind of shortened. Nathan, actually. So Nathan Romrell. I'm from Adobe, worked a little bit with Mike Tujer on kind of some concepts for like Cluster API. We're in I work in a separate working group, but we've been investigating it and pretty interested to see how this moves forward and hopefully participate. So
awesome. Welcome aboard, Nathan. We got lots of new people today. It's very cool to see.
Sorry, Mike, are you recording?
Yes, I am recording.
Okay.
All right, I see Danny, you've unmuted. Do you want to say hi?
Yep. Yeah. Hi, I'm Danny. I actually work with a company called Gremlin. We're a startup and we're looking to use Cluster API for our cluster management. So just getting an idea for what goes on under the hood.
Awesome. Welcome. All right, it seems the flow of traffic has slowed down. I'll give one more chance here if anyone would like to say hi. Okay, I'm not seeing anything, so let's move on to the open proposals readout. Do we have anyone who would like to talk on any of the open proposals right now? It looks like we just have one open at the moment, the label sync. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands go up, so let's move on to the discussion topics. So I guess at the top here, we have this reference to the 2023 meeting notes link. I don't know, did someone want to talk on this, or was just more just a reference link here, I guess? Okay, Stefan, you've got the next topic, so why don't you go ahead?
Maybe just about the first topic. I don't know. Vince, are you there? There were a bunch of comments in the chat that something of the permissions is wrong on the current doc.
Oh,
Yeah, we have.
sorry. Like we moved this doc and permissions. So like I had to reset the permissions. Now it should be fine. So if you actually just refresh the page, Mike, you should have editor access again.
Oh no, but the colors are going to go away.
I'm sorry.
I think you can still switch to suggest if you want to. It's just that editing button on the right top.
Yeah, I'm just accepting all the comments and should be fine. So if you all refresh the page, you should have edit access.
All right, awesome. Thanks for the update, Vince. Yeah, I was starting to wonder, like, did something change?
Okay, good. Back to my top.
Yeah, cool. Go ahead, Stefan.
Okay, can you click on that link? Was more like a FYI. So we had a PR, I don't know, maybe a year back or something, where Nadir was starting to document guidance on how multi-tenancy, I guess, should be implemented in providers. So it was around cluster identity. No, I don't know what the COD name was, but I think AWS and Azure have it implemented in the sense that they have separate CODs. And the document was about how they are referenced or something. But that PR never made it. So currently our guidance is more or less, I think, somewhere in the second quote, which is a little bit further up. It was an initial post, but in the second quote in the initial post. So yeah, I think currently you have something like infrastructure providers must be able to manage different sets of credentials. That's all that we have today on guidance. And I just created an issue out of that PR if someone wants to take that up. So currently we don't really have much, like, let's say, standardization about how multi-tenancy should be done across providers. So it's probably, I don't know how similar it is today. And yeah, that issue would be essentially taking up that work, seeing where the current state is, and then seeing if you want to get some kind of standard again or not, or if you're already there, I don't know. Yeah, just wanted to mention that if someone is interested in that work.
Cool. That sounds great. Are there any questions or comments about that before we move on to the next topic? Okay, I've not seen any hands, so let's Stefan, why don't you talk about cluster API and C groups v2?
Yep. So we recently noticed that there's something going on with C groups. So essentially, upstream Kubernetes implemented C groups a while back. It's GA, sorry, C groups v2 a while back. C groups v2 is GA since Kubernetes 125. There also was a blog post. And I was just looking at the current state of essentially of C groups v2 in cluster API. And the result was that core cluster API is pretty much, just agnostic to C groups v2. If I understood it correctly, with C groups v2, the systemd C group driver must be used. But that one is default since Kubernetes 121. So core cluster API should be fine. And then I'll switch over providers for a moment. In CapD, the situation essentially that we're inheriting whatever behavior kind has, and that comes down to whatever Docker is doing and the host OS. So essentially, you will get a C group version of your host machine if you run CapD. So if I run it on my local MacBook, I think the example is somewhere there. I have C group versions v2 on Docker desktop on my Mac. So CapD will also run with C groups version 2. And if you run it in CI, then we get C groups version 1 because our kind in Pro, which is running on Docker in a Kubernetes cluster on some OS, that's all that stuff is using C group version v1. So it's run on v1. But essentially, like CapD supports both. It works on both. We're testing or regularly running it on both. So that should be fine. And the only difference to core cluster API is that the systemd C group driver was only changed with 124. But that was essentially coming from kind. So they were using the C group FS driver for a bit longer until they got systemd working. So those two things are fine. And then we have the third thing in the middle, which is essentially how is the situation for every other, I don't know every other provider, but a bunch of other providers. And that's, can you scroll a little bit up? So I linked all kinds of documentation in this issue as well, but essentially comes down to whatever operating system you're using, and certain operating systems are supporting C groups v2, have it enabled per default. And for example, Ubuntu 22 is recommended for C groups v2 and uses C groups v2 per default, which means as soon as you provide some image with Ubuntu 22, you already get C groups v2. And the current situation is essentially that issue in image builder. I mean, for folks using image builder, I guess some people are building their images another way, of course. The current state is, if I got it correctly, that CapC, they're already providing a build for Ubuntu 22 and Cap OCI as well. And for the others, PRs are open. I mean, for some others, PRs are open. For a bunch of others, I think there's 20 is the latest version. So yeah, just want to provide that overview. If you are a provider who doesn't have support yet, it might be interesting to take a look at that to see if, yeah, for example, Ubuntu 22 build would be something in image builder, or I don't know which other operating systems are used there. In upstream, the situation is a bit mixed. And I linked the Slack thread also on that issue and also on the meeting notes where we were discussing with Ben from SIG testing and a bunch of other people. So it looks like a lot of upstream testers are already using C group version v2. There seems to be some talk to get rid of v1 at some point. So apparently there were like early discussions that System D might drop C group v1 support in 2023, but nobody really knows yet. So I think long term, we definitely have to go to v2. Upstream is already testing a bunch of their stuff on v2. Probably good that we get on that train sooner or later, including image builder and including our end-to-end test coverage. But yeah, that issue is mostly just to provide an overview and build some awareness. That's it.
This is a good note though, especially if you're using CapD or you're using Kind and you're increasing from Kubernetes 1.23 to 24, 25, because I ran into this problem as well, where my Kind deployment stopped working and everything. So definitely, if you're running into some issues and you're around those versions of Kubernetes, this is a good note to take a look at. Thank you, Stefan. I guess, were there any questions about that? Or I see, Mike, you've got your hand up. Please go ahead. Mike, did you have a question, or I saw you dropped your hand?
Yeah, sorry. I lowered the hand up and forgot to unmute. I thought that would do it. I would advise caution with having C groups v2 enabled on a 124 release. It still doesn't have the full support in all versions with the C advisor stuff. So we just need to be careful dropping C groups v2 enabled OSs with versions of Kubernetes that doesn't have that full support with the latest C advisor, making sure it has the right C advisor, because otherwise things like metric server doesn't get what it needs. So then things like HPA breaks, node evictions for memory and CPU pressure, that kind of stuff doesn't work quite as expected. So just as we start to drop those new images for 2204 and FlatCar and stuff like that, we just need to be cautious.
Thanks, Mike. That's a good note, and that might be a nice addition if you don't mind adding a comment onto this issue, just so people are aware of it.
Yeah.
Cool. I see, Cecile, you've got your hand up next. Or sorry, Stefan, did you want to respond?
Yeah, just a quick answer. It's definitely worth reading that blog post there and the corresponding documentation. They mentioned a bunch of stuff, and if I remember correctly, C advisor is part of that. I think somewhere if you scroll down, there should be a note about C advisor, either here or in the corresponding documentation page, which is almost the same. But that blog post is definitely very well written and worth a read. Yeah, there's C advisor somewhere there if you run C advisor. So.
Yeah, the docs mentioned some of it. We just, people may just assume, oh, hey, 2204, oh, hey, 124, hey, we're good to go. And then it's an older version of 124 that happens to not have the right C advisor version.
Yeah, absolutely good hint. Also, it's GA with 125, so it's probably good to, maybe just start with 125. I don't know. Sounds like 124 might be risky.
All right, cool. Cecile, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, nothing about C groups, but sort of a tangential related note about image builder. So the project has been, somewhat inactive in office hours and such. And a number of the maintainers who are in the owner's files right now, including myself, have had very little bandwidth to attend to the health of the project. I think there's an effort going on. There are a few folks that voiced interest in helping out and getting more involved in the image builder Slack channel. I think a few people from this community. So I guess just know that if you're interested in helping out in a related cluster API area, this is one that needs help. And I know this project gets a lot of attention, but a lot of the side projects that make this project work are also as important. So just to know that if you're interested in that stuff, Image Builder needs maintainers. And I think there are people that are talking about changing the office hours time to a new time that's more convenient for people to join. So keep an eye out for that. And I guess just reach out on the Image Builder channel if you're interested in helping.
Awesome. Thank you, Cecile. Was there anything else on the C Groups V2 topic? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands or anything. So Fabrizio, you've got the next topic with updates to the KubeCon and Cloud Native Con maintainer track.
Yeah, so just a note about what Cecile was saying. At KubeCon with Cecile, we were discussing how to help a new contributor, maintainer, reviewer to ramp up. So I think that I'm going to revive this work with Cecile sometime, and Stefan and other maintainers sometime at the beginning of the next year. But please, if someone is interested and has some idea on how we can help, feel free to reach out. This is a win-win, both for you and the company you work for, and also for the entire project. Moving on KubeCon, it is already time for a CFP maintainer track for KubeCon. I noticed that there is this blog post from CNCF, where basically they explain that starting this for KubeCon EU next year, the process is a little bit changed. So we have to go through, use the same application that is used for the standard CSP submissions, but everything else seems more or less the same for me, except the fact that if you are going to submit a panel for the maintainer track, you have to abide to the diversity rules that applies to the other panels. So the process is more or less the same. You have to reach out to, in this case, to a sub-project maintainer or to a SIG lead. They are the only one allowed to submit talks. Then there is no predefined number of talk for each sub-project, organization, etc., but there is CNCF basically is warning that they will answer to CFP according to availability, space, and whatever. So I think that sub-project leader can act as a coordination. Let's try to, everyone which is interested to submit, please reach out. Maybe it will be interesting to keep a new section on top of the document, so we keep track of how many submission are we doing.
Yeah, I think keeping a doc would probably be a nice way to kind of organize these things for sure.
Mm.
And the session we had at the last maintainer track, I thought was just a really awesome discussion that happened there. Hopefully we can repeat that in the future.
Yeah, just a clarification. This is those are CFP for maintainer track in the main event. They are not discussing agenda for the contributor summit, which will come sometime later.
Yeah,
So,
that is a good distinction. Yeah. So this
Okay.
is about submitting to the maintainer track for KubeCon, not
Exactly.
specifically the what was it called? The contributor day or something, I think.
Exactly, not for the contributor summit that happens 2 or 3 days, 2 days before the main conference.
Okay, cool. So yeah, so to everyone listening, if you want to submit a talk to KubeCon and you think you're going to include Cluster API, like please reach out. Let's try to coordinate, and yeah, hopefully we can get talks in the maintainer track then, right?
Yeah, the deadline is end of January, so there is time to think about it, but yeah, the news is out.
All right, cool.
Okay.
Thank you, Fabrizio. I think you got the next one too, right?
Yes, exactly. So I'm looking, we were looking at some stuff in the code, and basically we figured it out that we have some tech debt to pay down to keep the project maintainable, etc., etc. And so I've started collecting some idea with Stefan. I'm going to raise them up and open issue in the next few days or in the next weeks. But the first one that I would like to start is about standalone machine. So in Cluster API, historically, we started creating basic abstraction like machine, and then slowly we added control plane, machine deployment, machine set, machine pools, etc. So currently in the code, there are in some places still support for things like standalone control plane machine, which are control plane machine not controlled by KCP or any other control plane controller. That means that it is up to the user doing stuff like upgrades, rollout, create new version of machine, remediation, all this stuff. They are only just machine. It's like a pod without a deployment. So they are really only machines. So my question is, can we plan to drop support for standalone control plane machine? Please also be aware that those scenarios are not covered by end-to-end test. So it is technically supported, but we don't have a good signal. And honestly, managing control plane this way seems really old-fashioned to me. It is just like that.
So I see that Jack has raised his hand and Stefan has raised his hand. So Jack, why don't you go first?
Yeah, so were these added to aid rapid tests or for like IoT type scenarios? Why were these scenarios even ever added in the first place?
They were added because there was not KCP at the beginning.
Oh, I see. So it was part of the evolution of CAPI. I see.
Exactly.
So we're not aware of, I would say, let's just poll the community for see who actually depends on this scenario. Like there might be a weird scenario that we don't know about. And if no one's using it, then yeah, sounds totally fair for me. That's my vote.
Just a question. I'm not sure if you already know. I wonder of which component this is a feature of essentially. So if I got it correctly, it's a feature of the Kubernetes Bootstrap provider. So there's stuff like, the Bootstrap provider might generate CA certificates for a cluster, and if there's no control plane. I'm not sure if other components are affected as well. Like, I don't know, the core controller, that control plane itself is optional or stuff like that.
Probably there is also something in the contract. But yeah, I have to check. In main repositories, mostly we have an input in KCP, sorry, in CapBK, we have input in the machine controllers, probably machine set controller. So it is not only CapBK in core repo.
Alberto, you were next.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, I was just wondering if, Rich, you could be more specific about like where, like, oh, what's this coupling? Like, how do you mean we have support for the individual machines for the control plane? But maybe something that we want to discuss offline, like.
Yeah, let's do this way. I will open an issue. I will send an email to the mailing list, triggering the discussion. I think that there are two sides of the discussion. One is the dropping support for standalone control plane machine, and the other is dropping support for standalone worker machine. But yeah, we will figure it out step by step.
Right, that's what I wanted to ask you next. Like if you were referring only to control plane, or you were also talking about removing the ability for users to just create a machine for the data plane. And since that's in your mind as well.
So I stumbled with this and we saw that this is in different place of code. So I kind of agree with Jack. So if there is no one which is using standalone machine, let's just declare that we are not supporting this anymore. So we can clean up the code. We can make simpler assertion in around the controller and stuff like that.
Okay, I mean, yeah, let's keep the discussion alive. Like for offline for the control plane, I think I'm seeing what you mean. For the data plane, like just conceptually, it doesn't make sense to me to remove the concept. Like it's just like you can create a pod today if you want, right? Like it's up to you. You are aware of you have to be aware of the risk of just running a pod without a controller on top. And I think of machines the same way, but.
Yeah, I kind of agree. In theory, you can create it, but if no one uses it, why we have to support it? And if we have to support it, that someone please step up and help us and having a proper end-to-end test coverage.
But that's what I'm struggling
we
to.
We don't have it. So we don't have any end-to-end test that runs standalone machines, or that tries to simulate an upgrade of standalone machines, or that tries to move a cluster with a standalone machine. So if we want my point is the following. These things, in my opinion, was there due to legacy reason, due to the progress evolution of the project. If we want to keep it there, we have to make it first class. Documentation, end-to-end test, etc., etc. And so that's mean that, and we need user. Otherwise, it is there. If it is there only for legacy reason or for, let me say, in theory, could be useful. Honestly, it has a cost. But yeah, I got your point. This should be part of the discussion. I was just trying to make my reason kind of clear. So let's support things that we care about, and let's have top-notch support, including end-to-end test and documentation. Otherwise, let's reduce the scope.
I think you're missing a piece of information here, which could explain why we're talking about this. So, I mean, in theory, you could look at this and say, hey, we have a machine deployment, which creates a machine set, which creates a machine. Why do you have to additionally support a standalone machine? I mean, it feels like if you have test coverage for machine deployment, you also have test coverage for a machine, because the machine deployment is using a machine. So what is the difference in support? And I think the missing part here is essentially owner references and how cluster deletion works. So we have additional code to handle a standalone machine, so that a standalone machine gets plugged into the right cluster and also gets cleaned up correctly. And there's also code in KCP, for example, so that KCP can handle a case when you start with a standalone control plane machine, and then it gets adopted into KCP. So there's also support for that adoption feature. And I think we have to spell this out, essentially. What does it even mean, that support that we have today? I mean, it could be also fine to say, okay, it's fine to have those standalone cases, but maybe we don't need adoption cases anymore, because the adoption case was only to get from cluster API v on alpha 2 to cluster API v on alpha 3, and that's over now. But yeah, I think we need the issue and more details, and then we can nail this down essentially to see what support actually means and what is the gap on top of what we already get automatically through machine deployment in a machine set versus a standalone thing.
Yeah, thanks for context. We also have some code in cluster cutoff move, for instance. So yeah, I will try to open the issue at as much detail as I can figure out, so people can comment back.
Cool. We got a couple more hands up here. Jack, you're next.
I'll let Alberto respond because I think.
Okay, cool. Alberto,
that keeps
go
the
ahead.
flow going.
Okay, thanks, Jack. Yeah, just to follow up on that quickly, like, thanks, Stefan, that makes a lot of sense. Like, that context helped me understand. Like, I understand if we don't want to support the use case of adoption of individual machines and other features around individual machines, that makes a lot of sense to me. I'm not seeing how we couldn't support just a user creating a standalone machine. Like, how would we make a difference between a human or a controller creating machines, right? Like, machine sets at the end of the day is just something creating individual machines, right? So that's the same that if you, as a user of one kubectl create machine, like, I don't think we can prevent that from ever happening.
Yes and no, in the sense that, let me say, in the sense that machine created by user have a special treatment. For instance, when in the machine set, there is code that try to adopt machines. And this code has to account what's this machine, and it take care of labels and stuff like that. So we just stumbled into this, into the work. But basically, the work is what happened after Velero backup and restore, because Velero does not restore on a reference. And basically, we had to implement specific code in order to make sure that a standalone machine, when is restored, the controller does not fight in figure it out, is this a machine set owned machine or a standalone machine? So yeah, there are different pieces of code. I will try to provide detail, but let me say the level is really in details here, and we have code to maintain for it, and that's my point. Do we really need to maintain this? Is this a real use case or not?
Alberto, did that answer your question, or should I go on to Jack here? Okay, Jack, you're up next.
Okay, cool. So I just wanted to raise a little bit of a meta point about this whole conversation. So it says in that bullet point, technically supported, but not covered by tests. So I don't want to be too annoying and pedantic, but I would say if it's not covered by tests, then it's not supported. And so the message we actually want to be sending to folks is we have identified some tech debt. There is code in the Cluster API project that probably does something like this based on reading through the code, but it's no one that we know is using it and no one is testing it. So we are going to remove it because the presence of that untested code with unknown behavioral outcomes has a negative maintainership sort of cost burden on the rest of the code that we are actually testing and actually supporting. So I think the right way is to somehow communicate that concisely, and then give an appropriate amount of time, say 6 weeks, for folks to get that messaging so that they can potentially be like, oh, actually, I am using that code. I didn't know you were testing it. This is how it works. And advocate that we've, in fact, sort of take on that additional tech debt code and actually do support it. Hopefully that makes sense, that distinction, but
no, it makes sense. I think that being transparent, so we got this code, it's not properly tested. We are not sure if people are using it. So if someone is using it, please reach out and also be aware that we need help to implement a test. Otherwise, it will be removed. Makes sense.
Yes, I think that's the right messaging. Killian makes the distinction between unit and end-to-end tests. I'm not convinced that that means it's actually supported. I think having unit tests is great, but in terms of how one would actually use it, if we're not end-to-end testing it, the fact that particular functions are unit tested doesn't really mean too much to me. Whoever uncovered this and raised it +1, thank you for paying down tech debt. That's awesome.
So I think like it sounds like Fabrizio, you'll make an issue and then we can kind of get into some of the deeper details in that issue, hopefully.
I will start this thread and others are coming because there are some other, I don't know, we are testing 1.16 upgrades. So, okay, let's drop something, otherwise we will reach to a limit where we cannot basically manage. But one at a time.
Sense. And I echo I echo Jack's comments there too about, it's like if we just grow too much stuff and we're not testing all this stuff, then it's like we're just kind of accumulating cruft or whatever. I'm just going to kind of read some of the reactions from chat here because Alberto says, I understand the rationale to drop code from upper level tooling controllers that support individual machines. That makes sense to me. I'm not seeing why we would prevent users from creating individual machines as far as they are aware they'll miss integration with upper level tooling. I think that it's a good point. Hopefully we'll expand some of this in the issue. I guess if there's no more discussion to be had on this now, we should probably move on because we still got a few more things to cover and only about 20 minutes left.
Thank you for the great feedback and this needs more detail.
Yeah, it's a great discussion. I'm really curious to see how the issue folds out. Jack, you've got the next topic with a quick update on the managed feature.
Yeah, cool. So I just wanted to share this doodle. A few folks have weighed in. It looks like the slot's going to be 9 a.m. Pacific, but if you'd like to be involved in these conversations, please weigh in. That's really it. I know that we're entering into, for much of the world, the holiday season. And so just if anyone's curious, I don't think we're going to be making a lot of actual headway and making big decisions in the coming weeks. It'll probably be after the new year. But I would love to have a couple of at least introductory conversations before then. So
just out of curiosity, this is an old doodle poll, it looks like.
Is it?
I was just looking at November 21, 22, 23. Was that?
Yeah, I was trying to just do a day. Maybe I did it wrong. I'll follow up and sort of, if I need to do a new doodle,
okay,
I'll edit the link.
But just for clarity, this is like another chance to get together and talk about kind of what people want out of the managed Kate's feature and kind of what we're looking at.
Well, it has to. So sorry, I'll give some background information. So I'm advocating with a few folks that we form a kind of durable, I don't want to call it a working group because that's an overloaded Kubernetes term. So maybe we're going to lean into feature group where we self-organize and meet regularly to work toward a cluster API native managed Kubernetes solution. So it's a sort of indefinite, the scope is not fully bound at this point. The timeline isn't fully bound. It's more like, if you're interested in this, let's start talking about this in a more formal way as a hypothesis. The hypothesis is that a little bit more formality will accelerate progress towards figuring out what we want to do with managed Kubernetes and cluster API.
All right, cool. That's awesome. That was like one of the super popular topics at KubeCon, so it'll be cool to see what comes out there. All right, there's no questions on that. Hiromu, you've got the next topic with a roadmap of rollout.
Okay. I just want to know about the roadmap, future roadmap of the rollout future. Recently I posted a comment on Slack and Thank you, Fabrizio, for replying. And I heard that this issue is almost stopped, and there is a barrier to progress these issues. And I'd like to know that do someone knows what issues prevent the progress of this issue?
So you're curious specifically about this issue that you linked here? What's preventing kind of the progress on the next steps?
Yes, yes, and I'd like to, while developing, I think it's really useful to use this rollout feature, and I'd like to use it in future, but I think it's incomplete as for now.
I can see these comments are pretty old. Does anyone, I don't know, Fabrizio or Vince, do you have any comment on this?
Yeah, I give the context that I'm aware of. So as far as I know, the contributor that started this work now is not working anymore on Cluster API, or does not have bandwidth to work anymore on Cluster API. And this is the main reason why implementation got stuck. So no one is basically carrying forward the work. However, we got some discussion. I don't know if there is still one pending, one open PRs, or there was some Slack thread. I don't remember now. But basically, we kind of discovered that when we started thinking to this feature, we forgot a use case, which is basically what happens if your rollback is also rolling back the Kubernetes version, which is something that Kubernetes itself does not support really well. So given that, in my opinion, what we need to restart this work are two things. First is one person that take ownership of the work and does basically and complete and bring it to completion. Second is as a group, we figure it out how to prevent rollbacks that lead a cluster to a state which is not supported by Kubernetes itself. This is what I know about this implementation.
Okay. Okay, but at the least, I think it's partially work. I mean, you mentioned the rollback for rolling back the Kubernetes version, and that might be corrupt. That won't be work. That won't work. But I think there is a other use case like just changing the spec of massive deployment, and I think it worked.
No, please believe. Let me clarify this. I'm not saying that this is not an interesting feature. This is definitely an interesting feature, and probably, let me say that the gap between where we are and having this feature is not so big. So I want only to make sure that if we do this, especially for control plane, we prevent to roll back, because if you do an upgrade, some API get converted, and then you do a rollback of a Kubernetes version, basically you lose your data. Just to say the first problem to come to my mind. So it should be completed, and we should make sure that it works well and safely. That's it. But I'm not saying that but definitely it is an interesting feature, and I'm pretty sure people will use it.
Okay, so at least now, what I want to implement is just like a subcommand, like a history, because when I'm using this feature, I am a little bit confused. I can undo the machine deployment, but I can't get the revision of the machine set or old machine set. So now the first desire of me is just adding a rollout history subcommand. Is it acceptable in Cloud API? Like if I submitting the PRs for adding a history subcommand, it can be reviewed. Or like you said, we have to clarify the like ownership of this issue and making a roadmap or confirming the safety of these kind of changes.
I think, let me say, just a first reaction. I think that that a command that shows history does not make the situation worse. Or does not increase the risk from where we are. So I'm okay with that. What I'm not okay, there was some discussion about implementing history for KCP. And I think that before doing that, we should figure it out, the story about how to make a rollback safe. But showing history doesn't seem disruptive to me, or at least it doesn't seem making the problem bigger or riskier. So I'm okay. I don't know if others have opinions.
Does anyone else have thoughts about this? I'm not seeing any hands going up. So I don't know, like Hiromu, it sounds like, you know, Fabrizio at least is saying if you want to put the PR up to do the show history commands, that sounds like at least we could review it and see if it's, you know, if it's not doing something that's too disruptive, then yeah, that might be acceptable.
Okay, thanks.
And I guess if you're really curious about this feature, you know, it sounds like we're looking for someone to take it over. So if you thought you could drive it through to the completion, or if you had time to do that, that would probably be very welcome in the community as well.
Yeah, and I understand that we need further discussion to do that.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. We need to figure out the kind of how the rollback works and everything, or at least solve that or disallow it for control plane machines, at the minimum, I guess.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
All right, thank you. That was a great question. Florian, you're up next with a topic about reverse proxy communication. Are you here, Florian? If I'm not hearing you, if you've unmuted.
I think he had to drop off.
Oh, okay. Did he put something in the chat there that I missed?
He put it in the comment right there.
Oh, I guess I should use my eyes then. Thank you. Okay, let's go on to the provider updates then. Rich, why don't you take it away for Kappa?
Yeah, sorry, yeah, I've got three actually, it's all been listed. So Kappa, we've had an issue with the recent V2 release. The actual issue is probably secondary. What it has highlighted is a failure in our end-to-end tests, and specifically around upgrades. So a new version will be released tomorrow with a fix. So just be aware if you're upgrading from a previous version that there are issues with the current V2 releases. And then we're going to focus on end-to-end test improvements to close some of these gaps to help give us back some confidence in our releases. So that's Kappa. CapG. So we've just started the implementation of GKE. That's always been a gap in the CapG provider. So if you are interested in helping out, there is a very light proposal that was mainly used just to sort of shape the API. We've sort of started to split the tasks down here. So there's currently 2 of us working on this, but there is a desire to get this out as soon as possible. So yeah, anyone's interested, hop on the GCP channel, issue, wherever, and we can all chat. We've tried to split this down so that we can work on the controllers in parallel based on the API definitions. So yeah, and then the last,
Really nice.
yeah, it's been a gap for a long time. So yeah, it'd be good to fill that gap. And then the last one is we started a new control plane bootstrap provider for RKE2. Currently, it's sitting in the Rancher sandbox, but the idea is we're going to build this out to a point where it's fully completed and feature rich and tested, etc. And then find a place to donate this or create a new org that is separate to this. So again, if anyone's interested in helping out, this is early stages, so there's lots of work to do on this. Be great to get people's input, and hopefully we'll get donated soon. But yeah, that's the updates.
That's awesome. Very cool to hear about the rancher too. That's neat. So I guess that brings us to the end of our agenda. Does anyone have any ad hoc or last minute topics they would like to bring up? I'm not seeing any hands go up. So thanks everyone for coming out, and I guess we'll see you next week.
Thanks for hosting.
Thanks, Mike.